Okay, today we're going to be interviewing Priya Rathnam, and we will be talking about her experiences with the Asian American Studies Department. So my first question to you, Priya, is could you describe yourself and tell us a little bit about your family, your education, and work background?
Sure. So I was born and raised in Maryland, the early years in Baltimore County, actually Catonsville, Maryland, and then our family moved to Howard County. So I went to school in Ellicott City, Centennial High School, and then I ended up going to University of Maryland for college. I stayed in La Plata Hall during my time there, where I earned a Bachelor's of Science degree. And then I ended up moving to DC. I pursued graduate studies. I did a master's in public health at George Washington University. So I spent 2 years there doing an MPH in epidemiology and biostatistics. Kind of in a nutshell, my family has sort of the same immigrant family that a lot of families have. My parents are from India. My mom is a nurse. She's retired a few years ago, but she came to the United States as a nurse, and my dad's a chemist. He worked in a pharmaceutical company here in Baltimore, and they came here. My mother came first, and then they got married, and then my father came in the 70s, so they've been here for quite a while. They're actually from a state in India called Kerala, which is on the southern part of India, where they speak a dialect called Malayalam. So we grew up listening to Malayalam, kind of responding back in English, but kind of being immersed in the Kerala traditions and culture from their state in India. So I'm a first generation born in the US. I have a younger brother too. Growing up, we didn't have grandparents or a lot of blood-related family. It was mostly my parents and sort of the social structure that they built with their friends who were also kind of on the same journey, immigrant journey as them. So, we saw them work hard and struggle kind of to save money, primarily to assist their family back home in India, and to bring their siblings here if they could. So I think this is kind of a shared experience that a lot of first generation immigrant families have, is trying to make life a little bit better for the family back home. So kind of growing up, with my mom being a nurse, it was mostly my mom doing the night shift, working all night and coming home in the early morning, and then my dad going to work, doing the day shift and kind of rotating like that. So to avoid the kids having to go to daycare, thinking back now as a mom, I have 3 kids at home. I have no idea how my mom did it without sleeping, because as soon as she came home from work after 12 hours, I was probably awake and ready to go. So I doubt she got to sleep much, but just the recognizing and appreciating sort of the struggle they had coming to a brand new country, not having a whole lot of money, or just being able to appreciate that now as an adult and being a parent. And it's funny because my husband and I, we met, actually my husband JJ and I, we met on campus at Maryland, and we got married at the chapel on campus. We had the Turk come to our wedding reception. We used the Maryland buses to transport our guests around. Totally a Maryland wedding, but it's the contrast now that we have in raising our kids. We have so much grandparent involvement, and we have so much family to help out. So kind of knowing that my parents didn't have that to raise us, it just kind of is a different perspective. So I talked about sort of going to school at Maryland and then pursuing graduate studies at GW. I also kind of how I came to government service is kind of a unique story, I think, too. Straight out of graduate school, I had gotten accepted to a program called the Presidential Management Intern Program. And so it's a program that kind of recruits through executive order, and it's kind of implemented by the Office of Personnel Management. They try to recruit graduate level people who are interested in government service. And so, it's usually people that have graduate level or advanced degrees. And so I actually got positions offered at either CDC or here at FDA. And I ended up passing on the CDC job because I couldn't see myself moving to Atlanta. So I ended up staying here, which worked out because I ended up marrying my husband. I've been here at the Food and Drug Administration, the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition now for about almost 18 years. Wow. So it's funny how time flies, but yeah, so I've been here working in government for quite a bit of time, and my role here at FDA is I work on food safety related policies. We develop policies that when you think about it, really impact the daily lives of consumers who eat food in this country. So everything from enforcing regulations and laws that we have in this country to make sure food is safe and that it's wholesome and that it's labeled appropriately. I've been heavily involved in some efforts related to a law that President Obama signed in 2011 to sort of a sweeping law that kind of modernized the laws we have in the books to keep food safe. So that's kind of at a high level what I do here in my role at the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition. So
yeah, you seem very local to Maryland. Like
yeah,
been here like
born
basically
and
your whole
raised.
life. Yeah. But given that, do you feel like you still hold on to your parents' traditional values in your maybe everyday life, or maybe even weekly or monthly? Do you like follow certain traditions?
Yeah, so it's funny, as I am now a parent and I find myself thinking or saying or doing things that that remind me of my parents, even though like growing up I'm like I don't want to be like my parents, I want to be different. I feel like you take the good that you learn growing up, and I feel like it's instilled your values, and so yeah, I think there's a lot that I see in how I was raised, how my parents raised me. We're Christian. We grew up kind of going to church and developing close ties with others who were also from India, and so I learned a lot about kind of culture and Indian culture and Malayalam, which is the dialect that my parents speak. All of that sort of through my church family, and so that's kind of, those are the relationships I think I'll always have. So yeah, so I think there's a lot to be gained from having parents who are immigrants who really don't take things for granted so
Right.
much. So I think that's a great perspective to have growing up.
Do you feel like the traditions you practice are fairly similar to like the American Christian, or do you feel like you might have your own kind of culture mixed in with your Christianity because of the Malayalam background?
Yeah, I think it's definitely sort of a hybrid.
Okay.
There are certain traditions and taboos growing up, and my parents were pretty conservative growing up, so I didn't feel like I could express or communicate things that I feel that for my kids, I want them to be able to tell me everything and feel comfortable and open and not feel like they have to hide things from me. So I feel like there's for them there were certain priorities. It was education, and which are priorities to me too, but I feel like there are other things also in life that I try to stress to my kids. So things like empathy and being kind and things like that were important, but not so much of kind of what I got to see growing up. It was mostly just getting the best grades and studying hard. So for us, it's being immersed in this culture that we have, which is definitely a mix.
Could you please describe your relationship to the founding and growth of the Asian American Studies program at the University of Maryland? And try to be as specific as you can with dates, names, and other details, if possible.
Sure. So I was at the University of Maryland between 1994 and 1998 when I graduated. I was actually heavily involved more with the Indian Students Association, with the ISA. So I was in leadership roles in that organization, and so I wasn't so much involved in the Asian American Student Union until a little bit later. In that, we shared an office space at the Stamp Union, and so I became more exposed to some of the programs and things that the AASU was doing. And one thing that seemed kind of interesting to me was, at the time we had sort of a shared space there with the AASU, but also the Black Student Union, and they seemed to be sort of the larger group that had a bigger representation, I guess. And so when I looked at sort of the Asian student groups that were on campus, it seemed to be more fractured. Like there was the Chinese student group, there was a Filipino, there was the Indian, Bangladeshi, Pakistani. It was like all different groups, and so I found it really great that the Asian American Student Union was sort of the cohesive group that could bring all of those groups together. And we did a lot of activities where we would reach out to the leadership of the other student groups, whether it was the Black Student Union or the Asian American Student Union, or within the Indian Student Union, kind of get Indian Student Association, bringing them all together for events. And so if you want like specific things, I mean, what comes to my mind are sort of the times where we put together, we made posters, and we would do rallies, and we would march out to different locations on campus, whether it was in front of the Stamp Student Union or kind of walking out to where the administrators' offices were, to bring awareness. And so I kind of was inspired by a lot of the leaders at the time when I was at Maryland, to see how we could, and in fact, like some of those rallies still come to my mind. What do we want? Asian American Studies program. When do we want it? Now. Just sort of is just instilled in my brain. Just some of those rallies. So it was just, I think, bringing awareness to this issue that we saw there was a need for on campus, and being able to bring about change. So it was really exciting to know that just a couple years later, the program started. So it was exciting times for sure.
So did you feel like the ultimate goal was to like have a program for students to learn about Asian American history? Like, was that the goal, or was it like something else or more to that?
I think it definitely is both, because I think there was the need. There was the need to kind of bring, the sense of identity and inclusion, and showing that kind of the history as we've learned it isn't really all that it is. Right. There's some missing pieces, and so to know that there have been generations of contributions that Asian Americans have made in this country, I think was really eye-opening to me, because it's not something that I learned, in elementary or middle or high school growing up. It's just, you kind of, from the textbooks that, are the mainstream, you don't hear about that. But, right. And then, growing up here in this country, I think people tend to think that you've either recently come here, or you only go back, maybe a generation or two. But to know that, there has been, so many great things that Asian Americans have done to make this country what it is over hundreds of years, is really just empowering too. So I think there's that. So I think there are a lot of needs that the Asian American Studies program brought to campus, and so.
Do you feel like because we have a separate department for the Asian American Studies, it's much more powerful and much more needed than having just like a few Asian American classes part of the history department?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think when there are, when there's a program, then you can look at, different types of courses, and bringing in the best, instructors and teachers, and, making sure that your program is really achieving what you set out to achieve. I'm not sure if you can do that if you just have a few courses. So it was really exciting to know that after all of that, picketing and rallying and bringing awareness to this issue, that there was something really positive and tangible that came about to help future students that would be able to go through the program. And it's kind of like when you think about how we're all kind of on each other's shoulders, the next generation, it's just it just keeps getting better. We hope and we want as the courses and programs get better at Maryland, we're just becoming more attuned to how we can connect better with each other. And so
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you've definitely painted a very strong picture in my mind of how the situation was. But is there anything else that you may like to add about like vivid memories that you have in like life in College Park in the year 2000? Anything else like you would want to tribute?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of thinking back to my days in college, I just think of there was always the fun and sort of the energy and just the vibrant, diverse aspects of being on campus, like a campus at Maryland. So I think there's that aspect to it. At that time in your life, I feel like you're learning so much and you're absorbing sort of everything from everyone around you, and it's such a great time to meet different people that you would normally not always get to meet, whether it's your roommate or your RA or just people in your different classes. So, I mean, to me, it seems when I look back, it was just such a great time to collaborate with people and learn from the leadership of others that were, in important positions in different student associations, and so I think it's a great experience, and it really exposes you to leadership potential. That whether you use it outside of college, when you in your job or other professional life, I think it helps you kind of, especially if you're interested in sort of activism and organizing to make change. I think it's a great place to do it.
Have you been involved in other like activism activities after the Asian American Department?
I've been trying to do more. I feel like after college and graduate school, and then getting married and having kids, and it's been pretty busy. But I feel like as at several, many points in my life, I feel like I've been trying to make a conscious effort to kind of to give back and see what I can do to help the community, or give back to those who were kind of in the same place where I was 10 years ago, or now 18 years ago. So it's hard sometimes, I think, when you have other priorities going on in life. But I think with anything, it's always something that I've been wanting to and strive to give back when I can.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, maybe we've covered some of the things already, but would you like to maybe again describe like 2 or 3 events related to the founding and growth of AAST, the Asian American Studies program, that you personally witnessed and which made a very lasting impact on you? Like 2 or 3 things.
2 or 3 things that made a really lasting impact. I'm trying to think. One of the things would be attending some of the really large-scale programs that we did in the Asian Americans Student Union that were things like ICASU, putting together, kind of working on some of the programs when ICASU came to Maryland. Those are some of the vivid memories I have. But I think 2 classes that I remember taking that really impacted me the most were, a class taught by Will on Asian American experience, and then a class that Phil taught actually, that really kind of opened my eyes to some of the immigrant experiences and why it's so important to have a program that focuses on Asian American studies. Because I think that being a bio major, I took a lot of courses I needed to really get my degree, and it wasn't until the end of my time at Maryland where I was able to take some electives and look at taking Asian American Studies courses. So if I could go back, I wish I would have been able to take some additional courses, but I'm not even sure what courses were all offered at the time, but yeah.
Sure. Would you like to take a little break?
Sure.
So looking back over the years and like the contributions you made to the founding of the department, is there anything that you would have done differently? Like describe the situation and how you would differently in hindsight, like given modern day, like what you know now.
I mean, knowing now that the program actually began a couple years later, maybe I would have tried to even be a little bit more active in my time at Maryland. I mean, there's always that trying to balance studying and getting good grades with doing all this other stuff. So maybe there could have been a little bit more activism on my part. I mean, I think there was definitely, looking back, and again, my role was heavily in the early part of my time at Maryland with the Indian Student Association. I think there were probably some more opportunities we could have had with kind of organizing and doing more efforts with other student groups like the AASU at the time, because we did a lot of great events. Like for example, in the ISA, we put on a whole 2 or 3 day event focused on the life and legacy of Gandhi. And so when you think about the contributions that he made and how even Martin Luther King, all the contributions of those civil rights activists and people in history who we can learn from. I mean, I think we could have opened that up to other groups. We could have been more inclusive, I think. We could have been more active and proactive in how we organized events rather than trying to stay, this is the ISA event, this is the, Chinese Student Association event or whatever. I think we could have done more maybe looking back to bring different groups together because, in the real world, it's not little groups of people. Usually you have to deal with and have relationships with all different kinds of people. And so I think the more we could have maybe leveraged different groups early on, but some of that is just being in your comfort zone. Sometimes you're just more comfortable initially being around people that look like you and may have experiences just like you. Right. But I think when you look at overall, I think a lot of the experiences, whether you're from a Filipino background or an Indian background or Chinese background, especially if your parents were sort of the first to come here to the United States, or your first generation, I think we have more in common, I think, than we have that are different. So
yeah. Do you feel like students back then in 2000, they had much stronger nationality feelings and really were more involved in these kind of protests than compared to probably students nowadays?
Maybe, I haven't actually been on campus to kind of get a sense of that. Maybe if I was back there more on campus, I would be able to know kind of whether the pendulum has swung one way or the other. But, I think that kind of comes in waves, and sometimes I think there's some benefits to kind of knowing where you're from, where your parents are from, what your culture and traditions have been. I think there's definitely positive that comes from that, but I think there's also positive in being an active participant in the community that you live in, which may not be only Indian. So I think there's definitely something you can take and build to use in whatever community you're in, whether it's when you're in college or your family or life after. So.
So, like, did you feel like everyone around you was kind of part of the protest, or like if you were with like sitting with a group of friends, would you say like this person, this person, this person, they were all protesting with me the other day? Like, was it kind of like that? Everyone was doing it?
It was, it was pretty cool. I must say, like there was, certainly there were the key, the leaders of the Asian Americans, Student Union who led it, here's where the rally's going to be, here's the time, let's all meet, that sort of thing. But, I have to say, just from what I remember, it was a pretty diverse, group of people, not just from the AASU, but, all different, students who really understood what the issue was. And so I think all of these activities just brought to light, and again, awareness that there's a need. There is a need for this program, and rightfully so. There's something that we can bring to the table when voices are heard. So I feel that I think it's so exciting just to know that after our time there, that the program began. So.
How did usually like information spread, like on technological level? Like, how did everyone know what to do? Was you guys end up just calling each other, or like?
Yeah, it's so funny because I guess back then it wasn't like the social media age that we're in now.
Right.
So there was no sort of Instagram and Facebook and all the other so it was more flyers. We actually put up flyers.
Right.
There, and we passed out flyers at the union. There was emails. There were telling people. There was definitely calling people. So yeah, it's a different world now. So I feel like now with a few clicks of your on your phone, it could be you can communicate.
So one aspect that I'm still wondering is, what role did your family have on you during the time? Like, were they very supportive of like the amount of time you were spending, being part of these organizations, or did they, kind of like want you to just get back to studying? How did you feel it?
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. It was growing up in a pretty conservative household where. The number one expectation was that you're going to go to school to study and get good grades.
Right.
So that was definitely the emphasis, was making sure I had time to study and get my work done. But I think they did see the value in, in coming together and organizing. My family has always been supportive of me in, all the extracurricular activities, whether I was kind of leading some of the efforts with our Indian, our Malayali student groups, or I feel like I've always been, pretty active in church and other just sort of social circles. So I think they've, growing up, I think it was something that they just kind of expected. So it wasn't surprising that they would see that I was kind of involved in the ISA and the ASU activities, and so, but it was, I think it's hard because when you come from a family that really prioritizes work and education over everything else, it's kind of a balance. So I probably didn't tell them a lot of the things that were going on, quite frankly,
Right.
but it was, it was definitely worth it.
Okay. So your husband was actually also in the ISA program as well, right?
He was, and actually he was an office member of the Asian Americans Student Union. So he was one of the leaders towards the end of the 90s in the ASU. And so, yeah, he's got a different perspective, as being actually in the ASU. But again, since we were both, involved in those student groups, and we'd always kind of keep each other informed of what types of activities were going on. But yeah.
So one question I have is, what resources did the Indian Student Association have? Like, did you guys receive like kind of like funding from the university?
Yeah, so there was a budget. So every year we had a budget and we had to justify using, a certain number of dollars for, for certain events. And so oftentimes the year before, if there was any extra money, then we would hopefully have some kind of a cushion, not have nothing. But yeah, every year we had a budget that we would get some limited funds, from the school. There were also, things that we did to offset the costs, like we may have to, ask people to pay a certain, few dollars for a ticket fee, that sort of thing. But for the most part, yeah, we did get some money. I don't remember exactly how much. It's probably hopefully better now than it was maybe in the past. But we didn't have a lot of really high-tech, expensive events. We pretty much did one big cultural show, in the fall and then one in the spring, and we tried to do some monthly meetings where we would talk about or bring to light certain issues that may be facing the Indian Student Association, or if there were holidays, religious holidays, we tried to work with the Hindu Student Union, if there were certain festivals or things going on, or other student groups, when there was some way to participate in their functions. So
How do you describe the distribution of like these Indian groups and associations? Like you explained, like I think the ISA would be like the main like head one, like big one, and there's like these tiny student unions as well.
yeah, I don't know what the current state of that is. Back when I was in school, they were all totally separate, kind of, like I said, kind of fractured groups that each asked for some funding through, through the school. And so there really wasn't this cohesive umbrella. So the ISA was not sort of the big group that kind of kept all these groups underneath. All of them were kind of separate. So, there was, like I mentioned, the Pakistani group, there was the Bangladeshi group, there was Sri Lankan group, there was, so it was all separate groups. And so, one of the questions that I would get as a leader of the Indian Student Association was, kind of questioning whether or not we even really fit as part of the Asian American Student Union. Because the question we would get is, are Indians really Asians? And so it was really nice when my husband Jay and others who were Indian also became more involved in leadership positions in the ASU, because I think it, you can always tell people, yeah, of course, Indians are also Asian. But to actually see that there are Indians actively involved in the ASU, I think, sends a message that not only, are we in that, is India from that region on a map, but, like I mentioned before, I think when you look at our experiences, we have way more in common than, that are different. So we may speak different languages or have different traditions or cultures, or not look the same, but at the end of the day, I think what brings us together and what common things we have way outnumber the things that are different.
Definitely, sure. Do you feel like the Asian American department should still have the subdivisions, or should it just be one cohesive thing?
I think there is benefit to both. I mean, I think it would be hard to draw a line and say, it has to be this way or the other, because I think there are some positives you can take away from bringing people that are the same together. I just think you need to balance that with kind of being part of the bigger group. So I think there is definitely value in kind of everybody that has a similar faith or tradition to come together and have those celebrations. But I think there's also a lot of value to having that unit understand where they fit in the bigger scheme of things, and how they can contribute to the community at large. Because in the real world, it's not it's more not just how I can benefit this small group, I think, but how can I benefit anyone who may be going through the same type of experience or difficulty. So I think that kind of when you get out of college and you're not in those student groups, knowing how to work with people, all different people, is something that it really makes you be somebody in this world who can function in any environment, so that you don't have to always be living in a certain type of community, that you can appreciate the diversity in everybody around you.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense. So during the time period, what do you feel was going on in the minds of like the heads of the University of Maryland, who weren't really listening to you guys and like getting the program set up quickly? Like, what do you think was going on in their minds?
I would imagine that maybe they're thinking of the more sort of the logistics and the crunching the numbers and the budget and what are the costs that this would be. Maybe they're thinking the types of things that any kind of administrator would think of. Not so much. I mean, I'm sure there was some. They understood the vision and the purpose for the program, but I think maybe the initial thought is, okay, well, if we want to launch this program, what is it going to take? And what's the timeline to get that done? What are the costs? Who do I have to bring in? What types of things do I have to have in place, and kind of planning that out. So that's probably, I would think, is what would be going through their mind. And maybe also, how they react to some of the events that are going on campus, because when people are holding signs and chanting and rallying, I'm sure that's somewhat unsettling to certain administrators. So maybe they're also thinking, is this going to cause some problems? Is this going to be a distraction for students that are on campus? Is this going to draw, unnecessary attention to our school? I'm sure there are a lot of things that they probably had to deal with, sort of the optics also with bringing a new program to the university.
How do you feel that you guys negotiated to bring in this program? Right, there were these protests, but what would you say were the points that you guys made? Why should the program be there?
Yeah, so I was not involved in those level meetings. I mean, I think there were some key people who were really in those discussions, in those meetings with administrators that made those impacts. I mean, what I can say from my perspective is that I really just admire the perseverance and sort of just the toughness of the leaders that were basically my friends, who helped drive this initiative. And despite whatever challenges that they were told, that it's gonna, whatever hurdles that came about, it was sort of like, we're gonna get this done, we're gonna do this, this is the right thing to do, and just being committed to that cause. So, and I think for someone like me who may not have been in the driver's seat, it shows just what real leadership is. So I think it's inspiring. Even though I wasn't in those meetings, I think the learning for me was that this is possible. If you're committed and you're passionate about something, you can make things happen.
Who are some of the leaders during the time that inspired you? And you could talk about those people, and you could also then talk about like the leaders outside of the community, you know, like the big leaders that also inspired you as well.
Yeah, so Christina Lagdameo was one of the leaders of the ASU that really inspired me, and a lot of others at the time. Tone was someone who inspired me at that time. Oh gosh, so many others. Let's see, Schwinn. Let's see.
You also like describe some of the things that they've done, you know, like any like moments, images of like
specific moments. I mean, I think it's just what comes to mind are those discussions that we would have back at the student union, either before an event or a rally or afterwards, just to kind of debrief and decompress, and just where everybody just kind of plopped on the couch and was like, wow, this was amazing, or you know, I mean, that's what kind of comes into my mind, are those moments. Not so much sort of the individual tasks or what specific things that people did, but just kind of coming together.
What are some global leaders that inspire you?
Global leaders that inspire me. There's so many. I feel like there's so much going on right now in this world. I feel like it's just a time where there really needs to be people that step up more. And I think a lot of us, I feel, who have been active in our communities in different ways are probably thinking what else we could do to make things better, especially as a parent. I think when you have kids, it's not just about you anymore. You're trying to think about how you know, things will be 20, 30, 40 years from now. You know, I'm inspired by, you know, by leaders in my community. I'm inspired by, you know, I guess President Obama was an inspiration. I'm trying to think of, you know, they're just, I think, you know, even role models in your family, like my parents, I think, are inspiring in different ways. I mentioned sort of the struggles that they had to get to, and all the things that had to happen for me to end up here today. So, you know, I think there are a lot of people that that have a supportive role in getting all of us to where we are.
Sure. So one question I have is, so like describe some of the dreams that you had for the Asian American Studies program when you were on campus. It's like, you know, I mean, we've discussed a lot of things, but anything like specific you want to mention, any kind of dreams you had, and did the program end up realizing those dreams, or did it fall short on those dreams that you had over the years? And if those dreams that you had were not met, how can the program meet them today? You know, like visions you had for the program.
Sure. I mean, again, I was at Maryland before there was an actual program, right? So, you know, we had a few courses, and so I think when you look at it that way, I think that the dream was realized by there being, you know, an Asian American Studies program. So I think when you look at it that way, I think there's always ways that we can make things better. So I think it always has to be kind of reassessing what we can do to make things more relevant. Again, with all the crazy stuff that's going on in our world today, how can we do a better job to mobilize and get people to understand the issues that really impact people, you know, that impact us, that impact others. And so I think the more that we can continue to empower people to be leaders in our community. So I think that's something that that the Asian American Studies program does is really bring people to realize the leadership potential and identify issues, bring awareness to them, and then really try and do something. I think that's what I think of when I think of the Asian American Studies program, and thinking about sort of all of the great contributions that have been made by Asian Americans in this country, and so how we can build on that and improve, and that means making the program better. So I think those are all ways.
So one thing I didn't get to ask you yet is could you just describe to me the first day that you took an Asian American Studies class? What was going on in your mind? What was the atmosphere like?
So, okay, taking me back to the 90s, the late 90s. It's been a while. So, I think I was excited because, well, first of all, it wasn't like organic chemistry or something that I was going to be like, nervous about. It was something I was really taking because I wanted to take it. It wasn't something that was kind of required. So that was the first thing. So it was sort of like sense of excitement. Also, I think hearing how great the professors were. I'd heard so many great things about Will and Phil and others that I just was really excited about the idea of taking a course taught by those instructors. And I think something else. I mean, I think I would imagine that I probably thought, where are the Indians in this class? So, it goes back to that question of, do Indians see themselves as Asians, And so and that was like a theme that, that kind of played it quite a bit when I was at Maryland was, is your voice as an Indian American really part of the Asian American diaspora? Like, does it really fit? And so, so I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I mean, I think it's really important that we bring to light that there is so much that we have in common and that we do fit, rather than trying to figure out reasons why we don't. So I think that there is definitely that aspect that kind of that idea of, do people really think Indians fit into this? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So we're almost done. It's like, could you describe to me what you thought of like Professor Phil, when you took him? What was his personality like? How's his class?
Yeah. So, I mean, Phil is just one of the best professors I think that I've had. I think in that he's always been so approachable, able to explain things in just a very great way. So, I think he has so many experiences that he can draw from, and ways that he has impacted the Asian American community, the local community, and sort of at large. So I think it is, he's a huge resource to the Asian American Studies program at Maryland, and I think I just remember his, that course being, something that I really felt I could, that I would remember, and that I would really understand some of the issues that Asian Americans encounter that I really didn't know about. And again, that's just because of, in school you don't learn about those types of things. So it was very eye-opening. So I just, I can't say enough good things about Phil.
Yeah.
And I mean, he and his ability to continue to bring the alumni back to contribute. Even this part of this, this recording that we're doing is all just his way of keeping the community growing and making sure that we can come back and feel welcome coming back to contribute further to the growth of whoever else is starting off at Maryland. So it's great.
Yeah. Well, so we just have one last thing for you to do. We would like you to speak directly to the camera and
Okay.
this time just like address future generations of the Asian American, studies program students. Just like summarize in just a minute your dreams for them and any lessons you learned in your days affiliated with the program. Just like feedback and advice for the future generations.
Sure. So I guess my advice for future generations would be that, there is no time better than now to do something. We're at a, time in this world, I feel there are a lot of different issues that you could become involved in. So, think about what things you really care about. Where does your passion lie? Is it with helping serve underprivileged communities? Is it something you can do to help certain populations or animals or the planet? What are the things that really matter to you? Because there really is no better time than now. And so it could be something big, it could be something small. I think as long as it's something, it kind of reminds me of what Gandhi said a long time ago, kind of be the change you wish to see in the world. So if there's something you can do, be that change.